I am not Harvey Milk, but I am here to recruit you. You're looking at Emmy Award-winning actor Billy Porter. Yes, you can clap to that. The groundbreaking FX network series Pose. Yes, Billy Porter is the first openly gay black man to win for Best Actor in a drama series for his portrayal of the character Pray Tell, a charismatic hype man from the house ball scene in 1980s New York. From Broadway to television and beyond, Billy Porter's on-scene character reminds us that maintaining one's dignity may be the greatest love of all. Billy knew he was gay at a very young age. He grew up in a very religious household, which prevented him from being his whole self. He left home as a teenager, but throughout his entire career, he wasn't able to escape anti-gay and systematic homophobia. In 2017, Billy got married to his longtime partner. Billy was literally born a few weeks before the Stonewall uprising in 1969, a milestone in the modern-day LGBTQ rights movement. And he has matured as the LGBTQ movement has matured. But imagine if, like too many LGBT older adults, Billy was suddenly legally stripped of the right to be employed, the right to marry, the right to be treated equally in the sunset years of his life. The fierce urgency of now is upon us. This is the nightmare scenario that too many LGBT older adults fear, and what makes caring for the Stonewall generation absolutely necessary. An act of love, an act of respect, most importantly, a demonstration of dignity for all. Now, I'm not here to tell you about Billy Porter's breakthrough moments in life and career as much as I'm here to help you understand how and why the fight for LGBT equality, for equity and liberation is the cause of an entire generation, and why my cause is your cause too, if you believe in the right of human dignity for all. This year marks the 50th anniversary of the Stonewall uprising, an incredible vantage point to do a look back at how far we've come, and yet still how much further we have to go. With that, let's take a jaunt down memory lane. In 1973, a few days before Christmas Day, the New York Times reported that the Board of Trustees of the American Psychiatric Association approved a change in its official manual of psychiatric disorders. Quote, homosexuality per se, the trustees voted, should no longer be considered a psychiatric disorder. It should be defined instead as a sexual orientation disturbance. Progress? According to The Guardian, this iconic 1989 poster is typically punchy with its three figures covering their eyes and ears and mouth, and its memorable slogan, silence equals death. Pop artist and activist Keith Haring had a gift for images with direct impact. And here, the stakes had been raised by the American government's shameful and inadequate response, failing to expand awareness on the AIDS crisis. The 1990s gave us Don't Ask, Don't Tell, the policy that prohibited military personnel from discriminating against or harassing closeted homosexual and bisexual service members or applicants, while barring gay, lesbian, or bisexual persons from military service. And the 1990s also gave us DOMA, the Defense of Marriage Act. It defined marriage for federal purposes as the union of one man and one woman, and allowed states to refuse to recognize same-sex marriages granted under the laws of other states. The 2000s saw a federal marriage amendment. But since 2008, as we take a look at this rainbow White House, it's okay, we can all have a nostalgic moment. We've seen it is what it is. We've seen unprecedented progress on LGBT rights, including healthcare protections from discrimination based upon pre-existing conditions, the first comprehensive national HIV strategy. We saw the repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell. We saw public support for same-sex marriage from the first sitting United States president, and passage of the Matthew Shepard and James Byrd Hate Crimes Act, which extended the coverage of federal hate crimes law to include attacks based upon the victim's actual or perceived sexual orientation or gender identity. But while changing laws is hard but necessary, changing hearts and minds is even harder. Right now, I want you all to close your eyes. Everybody close your eyes. You're still looking at me. Close your eyes. Close your eyes and think about a gladiator. Think about a pioneer or a personal hero that has valiantly enlisted in the battle to change the hearts and minds of others. And on the count of three, I want us to invite these heroes, invite these pioneers right here into the room with us. I want you to speak their names. All right? You ready? 1, 2, 3. While I'm thinking of a very personal gladiator, my own brother David, who is recovering from a stroke, and I hope he gets well soon, there's another gladiator that I look up to that comes to mind. Author and activist James Baldwin is my personal hero. He is my gladiator. He was unapologetically black, unapologetically gay, and unapologetically wrote about issues related to race and class and power through the lived experience of a black gay man that refused to believe that he was any less American or any less human than anybody else. The Stonewall generation, like James Baldwin, refused to bargain for their liberation and subsequently our liberation. And for this, our movement and all people of conscience are in their debt. It's on us to protect the most vulnerable among us. It's on us to protect the dignity of a generation that gave us so much. Have you ever wondered what makes LGBT older adults more vulnerable? Well, let me tell you, 50% of single LGBT older adults believe that they will have to work well beyond retirement age, as compared to 27% of single non-LGBT people. Did you know that 42% of single LGBT older people fear that they will outlive the money that they have saved for retirement, as compared to 25% of their single non-LGBT counterparts? And 40% of LGBT older adults say their support networks have become smaller over time, as compared to 27% of single non-LGBT people. Approximately 1 in 5 LGBT older adults are people of color, and, wait for it, 1/3 of LGBT older adults live at or below 200% of the federal poverty line. Today, we are gathered here in San Francisco, a truly special place, and not just because I grew up about 30 miles east of San Francisco, but the Bay Area has long been the conscience of a more fair and just America in an effort to make humankind more fair and just to people around the world. As we gather here today, as we look at this photo of former First Lady Eleanor Roosevelt, we must never forget that among leaders, among pioneers, among visionaries, we can do consequential things to uplift humanity. It's in this spirit In the city of San Francisco, nearly 75 years ago, leaders from around the world gathered to hatch the beginning of what would become the United Nations Declaration on Human Rights. The Lebanese philosopher and diplomat Charles Malik called it, quotes, an international document of the first order of importance. While Eleanor Roosevelt, the first chairwoman of the Commission on Human Rights that drafted the declaration, she said, it may well become the international Magna Carta of all men everywhere. In a speech in October 1995, Pope John Paul II called the declaration, quotes, one of the highest expressions of the human conscience of our time. Affirming the dignity of LGBT older adults until the very end of their lives just might be the highest expression of human conscience in these turbulent times. That's why we must doggedly pursue equal protections for LGBT people at home and around the world with the same vigor and commitment as the space race to the moon. The UN Declaration on Human Rights germinated right here in San Francisco and was just as pioneering and consequential as putting a man on the moon. So I submit to you that what we need today is a global declaration on LGBT rights. What we need today is a race to protect the dignity of LGBT older adults that are staring down the uncertainty, that are staring down the insecurity of a nation without federal LGBT equal protections under the law in housing, employment, and public accommodation. All things considered, marriage rights aren't nearly enough, and that's why I'm challenging everyone that can hear my voice to join the movement for LGBTQ data collection. How can we make the next decade the decade of big data in the LGBTQ community? LGBT inclusive demographic questions matter. Research questions that account for the rich diversity of the LGBT community, it matters. LGBT inclusive surveys matter, including folks of color in this research. LGBT folks of color matters, not just sprinkled on top, but baked in. Baked in. LGBT data matters. We can't care for the Stonewall generation if we don't know the fullness of who they are and why and how the full range of their identities make them unsafe, insecure, and more vulnerable from their early years to their sunset years. The chance to end one's life well and with dignity hinges on what we do to create an LGBT data paradise where there is currently an LGBT data desert. The LGBT data desert gives way to implicit bias, it gives way to algorithmic bias, and challenges when it comes to machine learning and the use of artificial intelligence technologies that don't understand or consider the context and the nuance that I've shared with you today. So while these technologies are still only in the nascent stages of their development, they influence a growing share of our daily lives, but can't do so equally, can't do so equitably if there's no LGBT data on any generation, particularly the Stonewall generation. So I leave you with this in well. I leave you with this quote from Archbishop Desmond Tutu. And hopefully when you see this quote, it will bring you back to this moment here today. The Archbishop said that you can't be human all by yourself. And when you have this quality, Ubuntu, I am, therefore you are, therefore I am. You're known for your generosity, We think ourselves far too frequently as just individuals separated from one another, whereas you are connected, and what you do affects the whole of the world. Thank you.